Good morning. You're listening to WGRG 100.5 FM in Geneseo. It is the third day of November, time change weekend. So while you'll change the time on the clock tomorrow, or I guess early Sunday morning, but don't go changing your radio dial because it's time for Let's Talk Geneseo with your host. I'm Keith Kennett and City Administrator Brandon Meglin. Good morning, Brandon.
Good morning. How are you this morning, Keith?
Well, I'm doing just great.
Nice. Did you go trick-or-treating?
I did not leave the house. We have this whereas kind of a good location to where there's just a lot of children active.
Yeah.
So Kim and I, we dress up and then greet the children. Everybody got a bag of Skittles and a LED rocket flashlight.
Oh, we actually were up in your neighborhood with the nieces and nephews, but they did not make it all the way to your house.
We noticed that, but that's okay, Brandon.
Yeah.
Did have to say a lot of neat costumes this year, and a wide age group of trick-or-treaters. And maybe it was just by us, or I'd like to think that's the entire community. But just the most pleasant trick-or-treaters, a lot of please and thank you. And for the first time, I had someone actually do a trick.
What was that?
We did a backflip. We had two young men dressed as Spider-Man, or Spider-Man, I should say. And he took off his shoes and his little face mask and that sort of thing, and actually did a very impressive backflip right in the front yard.
Well, I had my snowmobile gear on to go out. I mean, it was 25 degrees with the windshield that night.
You know, I wasn't sure if we'd be better off giving out the LED flashlights or T-shirts that said "I survived Halloween."
Yeah.
2023. Either one would have been appropriate. But,
it was still fun.
Yeah. And while we're on that, I had to say the cute costume, and they didn't come by the house. They turned the other way, and we never saw them. But it was a girl in a rooster, one of those inflatable costumes that you wear, as a rooster, multicolor and stuff, just kind of the cutest thing. At least looked cute from the 100-foot distance that
Hopefully
I saw.
It had a heater in it.
It probably didn't, but she looked bundled up and okay. So anyway, good Halloween, and all went well in the community. So a good city management there, Brandon.
Thanks.
But today is all things finance.
Yes.
And we have a special program, and so we're going to turn it over to Brandon here to pilot us through the world of financial things of interest.
Yes, we're starting this is our first reoccurring segment, I would say, that we're going to have on the program. We're starting,
and I don't mean to interrupt, but maybe our guest will decide if this is reoccurring.
Well,
or
that's
not.
true. I mean, if it falls on its face today, it could be the first and only. But hopefully he'll keep coming back with us here. But we're going to start a new program called Let's Talk Money with Mark. This is with Mark Gravicheski. Mark you've probably seen Mark on WQAD on the segment Your Money with Mark. I know I've been watching it for years. Usually I'm on the treadmill at that time. So on Monday mornings, you're the guy I watch as I work out before work. But that segment's every Monday on WQAD. He's been doing that for years. He writes for the Quad City Times, has a column in the Dispatch, and serves as a resident columnist for Lee Enterprises Insight Magazine. Welcome, Mark.
Oh, good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I think so. We're going to do this once a month. We'll work around Mark's schedule and have the Let's Talk Money with Mark segment once a month to do all things financial talk.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think the whole purpose of this is, obviously, our listeners, there's a lot of stuff on the economy, the financial markets, the stock market, and it's a chance for us to kind of just talk in an open discussion, what's going on, why is it important, and how does that impact those household budgets and those household conversations about finance.
Yeah. And I didn't mention that Mark is a partner and financial advisor with the Quad Cities Investment Group in Davenport as well. And as we were walking into the studio this morning, Mark had to take a selfie with his old locker number.
Really?
It's still there. See, I grew up in Geneseo, graduated class of 1987, then got a couple of degrees at Illinois State, but then eventually, like so many people, migrated to Chicago. And after about 20 plus years in the Windy City, I moved back to Geneseo about 8-9 years ago. So for me, it's really kind of been a full circle so to speak. And then just to walk in this high school and after all these years since 1987 and to see all of the changes, but the one thing that did not change was my locker for 4 years was still there.
Well, that's awesome.
Yes.
You take joy in the simple things in life, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us a little bit, if you can expand on that, Mark. Your journey obviously started here in Geneseo. You're back in Geneseo now. We're lucky to have you local. I mean, I get the pleasure of serving with you on the Chamber of Commerce board as well. You're involved in the community. Tell us more about that.
In Chicago, primarily, I for over 14 years, I was a professional trader on the Chicago Board Options Exchange. So kind of living that chaotic work environment of yelling, screaming, pushing, and shoving for over 14 years in the trading pits of Chicago. And after 14 plus years, the industry started to change a little bit, but at the same time, it was nice to leave that industry and actually be able to sleep at night and go on vacation and not worry about what the financial markets were doing. After a year or so away from the trading floor, I decided it'd be a good time to relocate back to Geneseo. And about 8+ years ago, I joined Quad Cities Investment Group across the river in Davenport, and I've been a financial advisor since. And one of the things I certainly enjoy is just kind of sharing my experiences and my knowledge on the economy, the financial markets, whether it's inflation, whether it's the unemployment rate, what's going on with retail sales. I just really enjoy talking about that and sharing my outlook on what I see going on.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's get into it. Right now on the top of everybody's mind is inflationary pressures. So what can you share about inflation? Why does it seem to be trending back up?
Well, to answer that question, we kind of need to go back a couple of years. If you remember back in June of 2022, inflation peaked at 8.9%. Now, over the following 12 months, we saw this gradual, steady decline in inflation down to 3%. But in my opinion, Brandon, one of the main reasons for that decline in inflation from 8.9% down to 3% was a decline in energy prices. During that timeline, the price for a barrel of crude oil fell from about $120 a barrel all the way down to $67 a barrel. But if you took a deeper dive into those inflationary metrics, you'd see that outside the realm of those lower energy prices, inflation was still quite rampant and widespread throughout the rest of the economy. But then in June and July, those low energy prices, again, which helped drive inflation from 8.9% down to 3%, those low energy prices started to rise and started driving inflation higher with it. In July, inflation jumped from 3 to 3.2%. 1 month later in August, it jumped even higher to 3.7%. And that's kind of where we're at right now with the national rate of inflation at 3.7% and wondering if it goes even higher.
Yeah. Yeah, so get your crystal ball out. I mean, what's going to happen this next year?
Crystal ball is in the shop. I'm using my lucky rabbit's foot, actually.
Well, maybe go look into your old locker, and it will give you the future. I don't but, yeah, I mean, what do you think the trend's going to be, or what are the indicators pointing?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. And whenever you talk about, what's the forecast for inflation, whether it's a couple months down the road or really a couple of years down the road, remember the ultimate goal, Brandon, that we want to get to is for inflation to return to that ideal target rate of just 2%. But the U.S. economy hasn't had a target rate of inflation of 2% in nearly 3 years. You've got to go all the way back to February of 2021 when inflation was just at 1.7%. So we've been above that 2% target rate of inflation for going on 3 years now. The challenge is that because inflation has become so embedded within the economy, that it's going to take some time for that inflation, those high prices, to essentially filter their way out of the economy. And it was just literally a couple of months ago, back in September, that the Federal Reserve really kind of sent this shot across the bow to Wall Street, when the Federal Reserve, which again is tasked with trying to get this inflation under control, the Federal Reserve shocked Wall Street and said, well, you know what? Expect high inflation to last through the end of 2026. That's another 3 more years of high inflation above 2%. So if you're the average American consumer and the average American family, from start to finish of this current inflationary cycle, that's approaching 6 total years of excessively high inflation that your household budgets have been struggling against.
Yeah. So that leads to the next question, which I know is very difficult to answer, but you're the expert here. I mean, what can your average household, your average consumer, what can you do to avoid some of the pressures that are out there?
And that's a great question. I wish I had better news. Because if you compare, Brandon, this current inflationary cycle to many of the other inflationary cycles we've kind of seen over the past few decades, there is a couple of hallmarks or identifying features that this current inflationary landscape has. The first one is that it's extremely broad-based. In other words, very few goods and services have been shielded from these rising and high prices. But the second one, though, Brandon, is that one of the areas hardest hit by these rising prices over the past 3 years are those everyday basic necessities. And you think of basic necessities, it's food, it's clothing, it's shelter, it's energy prices. And look, those aren't exactly high-end luxury goods and services that you can suddenly do without. You need to buy those goods and services to provide for you and your family. So it makes it extremely challenging for families in a way to try and maneuver around this inflation when the bulk of your discretionary income is going to pay for those basic necessities, when those are some of the hardest hit. For many households, you look at some of their income demographics, some families spend up to 90% of their disposable income on those four essential basic necessities. So there's just not a lot of leeway, again, for families to maneuver around these high and rising prices.
Yeah. Thanks for all the great news today, Mark.
I'm just a barrel of optimism today, aren't I? Trust me, I have more happier discussions we can have.
One of the other questions that I wanted to pick your brain on was, investment opportunities in this market. We see a lot of, I've talked to some folks recently about, the high CD rates, maybe some of the shorter term, more secure opportunities. But what kind of advice are you guys issuing today when it comes to investments in this kind of market?
Well, you have to. That's a great question, and trust me, I get that question all the time. But you need to go back and realize what caused this market chaos in the first place. If you remember back in January of 2022, the stock market was at an all-time high, but that sudden decline in the marketplace we saw for most of last year was caused by what? High inflation. Inflation, again, in June of 2022, reached 8.9%, a 42-year high. And what does high inflation trigger? High inflation triggers and means that the U.S. Federal Reserve will have to be extremely aggressive in raising interest rates to try to get that inflation back under control. So now we're in this very combustible environment of high inflation and high interest rates. And what does that do? It makes for a very uncertain economic outlook. And that's why there's so many economists and analysts on Wall Street expecting or projecting some type of recession in the first half of 2024. So until Wall Street gets some level of clarity that this inflation is finally under control, and they're not quite there yet. In my opinion, we should expect this volatility and chaos in both the stock and bond market to continue. Again, I wish I had better news.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for all that. Good information. May not always be the best of news in the conditions, but
well, you know what? It may not be the best of news, but it's one of those things where at least people kind of get that understanding of what's going on in the market. You know, they see the headlines in the newspapers and in the magazines. They watch the evening news, and they just see all this and hear about all this volatility and chaos in the stock market. You know, there are some opportunities, but at least it kind of gives them sense of knowledge and understanding of, hey, I get it. I know what's causing this concern on Wall Street and in the various financial markets. And again, it ties back to inflation. And until Wall Street gets some level of comfort that high inflation is finally under control, and again, Wall Street is not there. They don't have that level of comfort. I think it's going to be a little hectic and chaotic, you know, in the short term at least.
Yeah, and uncertainty certainly is, not Wall Street's friend. And it does seem though that historically, we can look back and go, okay, well, when we were in this similar situation 30 years ago, it kind of played out this way. And so you look at historic trends and all that. However, part of the challenge in this environment seems to be is that there really, though, isn't too many apt comparisons of all the factors that are happening now relative to some past events, at least from my limited understanding, that we have high inflation. Prices are kind of going through the roof. Anybody, as you shared, you go to the grocery store, you go to anything,
you feel it.
You definitely do, and it's been a fairly large increase over a fairly short period of time, but it's going to continue. It's no end in sight, but yet employment seems to be relatively strong. Wages seem to be relatively strong, and then even now, if you look at the stock market and what have you, is kind of on a little bit of a tear with good news of potentially no future rate hikes or what have you. But I guess that is the challenge of investment, though. So now you're somebody maybe 50 years old, 60 years old. You're looking at retirement. Maybe you have your money in the market or in bonds or what have you, but you're thinking about, what's the best thing to do for the future? If I'm in some sort of investment getting 2-3%, inflation's running 3, 4, 5, 6%. In a practical sense, though, if you are that person, obviously seeking out good financial advice, but bonds and stuff seem to be a little bit of the safe area, for now, at least the short term, with rates being fairly decent in that regard. So if you're somebody out there in that situation, is that a good simple thing maybe to keep in mind?
This is the time where obviously you always want to say diversify, but I kind of want to tail back to what you were saying about it, and I think you really kind of nailed it on the head here, where it says this market decline. It requires a perspective. In other words, this is not the first downturn or market volatility we've seen in the U.S. stock market or the U.S. bond market, and it's not going to be the last. But in the entire 126-year history of the U.S. stock market, the stock market has always recovered. It's always rebounded. It's always went on to set new all-time highs. For this current kind of chaotic landscape, we just don't know how many days, weeks, or months that's going to be. So again, it just requires patience. And sometimes I remember back to when I first started on the trading floor back in I don't want to give the exact days. It kind of ages me a little bit here. But one of the first words of wisdom is just, sometimes the best trade is not to trade at all. And when you kind of let your emotions carry over, you sell at the wrong time, you buy at the wrong time. Just try to have a patient outlook to this current volatility. Things are going to get better. Again, we just don't know when it's going to be. So try not to take those drastic, severe measures and just look back at history, and you see all of the chaotic moments in the U.S. stock market. And here we are, just literally maybe 10% short of a new all-time high. But when we breach that new all-time high, we just don't know. Take a deep breath, have a bucket of coffee, and life goes on.
The old adage: don't make an important decision based on emotion.
Yeah. Okay, well, this is a good time. I want to bring our next guest into this conversation. We have someone else in the studio this morning with us. Jamie Matthews is the City of Geneseo Treasurer and Finance Director with us. And, as we all know, the city is exempt from inflation, right, Jamie?
Yes, absolutely. We wish.
Yeah. Well, why don't we take a couple minutes, Jamie, if you can introduce yourself to us, maybe a little bit of background, how you got to be with the City of Geneseo.
All right. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to have to tell you my background, but...
It can be short.
Okay. So my previous career, for most of my career, actually was in banking. Worked from being a teller all the way to being the vice president of a bank. And decided I didn't want to drive an hour to work back and forth anymore, and found this position, and I absolutely love it. And that's about it with my background.
Nice. We wanted Jamie to be involved in this conversation today too. It's kind of all things finance, and right now the city is in budget season. We're setting the budget for the 2024 fiscal year, and we're also doing the tax levy, which is something that we have to do at the city each year as well. So, Jamie, maybe you can kind of explain. We get a lot of questions on these things at City Hall about, how exactly does the tax levy work? Can you kind of give us a broad perspective of what is the tax levy for the City of Geneseo?
Sure. So the tax levy is basically each taxing body going out and requesting funds from the taxpayers. And those funds are going to be used from anything from schools, roads, hospitals, and each taxing body has specific things that they can levy for. For the city, we only levy for things that pertain to the city. So police protection, we levy for our corporate, which covers our parks, cemeteries, for our streets. And I think the biggest question we get in for calls on the tax levy is, you'll get your tax bill and a citizen will say, why are my taxes being increased so much by the city? And that's a big misconception. So the city is only 12.1% of your overall tax bill in Geneseo. And I try to explain it to residents as a pie. And we are a small piece of that pie. And each taxing body requests on their own behalf how much they want to levy for what they need.
Yeah, thanks. I think that is a very common one, and you probably get it too, Keith, from an alderman perspective.
Well, and the tax bill, nobody likes to see it, and you open it up, and it's a question of at least it seems, how much now has it gone up, this year, and then usually, right, the reaction is, it's the city, and just as Jamie said, we are a small part of that. You have schools, you have park district, you have college districts, you have, if you look at it. There's all sorts of entities involved in it. However, nonetheless, it's still a bill for X amount that you need to pay. And I do know that at least for the 12.1% that we have control over, we take that everything we do we take seriously, but certainly that is probably one of the items that we have the most discussion on as the year goes on as aldermen about how do you strike that balance between providing needed services but recognizing that there has to be some way to pay for that. And it's, and even lately here, we've been running into to things to where there is, we're aware of the nickel and diming aspect of things too. It may be simple. You're sitting in a meeting, blah blah blah. We need to increase this for that. It's just, it's going to be another $3 a month on your utility bill, and then but then $2 here, $3 there, $5 here, and while they're all needed and important, cumulatively, they can add up, and then you have all the other districts doing the other thing. And then the wild card too is that even if we hold our rates the same, let's say, if your property value though is assessed at a higher valuation, well then your bill's going up just because of that. But yes, nobody likes the bill going up, and I think we're all there with you there. But however, it's unfortunately the city really has very little influence over that. That even if we were to say, okay, we're not increasing anything, you probably wouldn't notice a big difference in your tax bill.
Yeah. Maybe Jamie, you can elaborate on that a little bit too, as Keith just touched on the EAV, the assessed value of the community. How your taxes are actually calculated are based on the assessed value of your property, right? So there are communities around us that may have actually a higher tax rate, but the assessed value of the community and the properties therein is much less, right? Can you expand on that at all? Or?
Sure. So with the increase, which we did see a significant increase, which is good for the city of Geneseo, almost $4 million going up. And what happens is then each levy has a specific rate to it. And in order to stay up with that rate, then those need to increase. And so that it was what in turn will increase your tax rate.
Yeah. One of the other big misconceptions or questions that we answer is you see the line item for parks, or it's called Park District on the tax bill. And that's actually its own taxing body in Geneseo, the Park District. They do a lot of tremendous things for the community, but Richmond Hill Park, Champion Park, Lodge Park, City Park, these are all things that fall under the city line item. So some people ask, why am the city of Geneseo is billing me here? And then you got another line for all the parks that you're No, actually, the parks that people know and enjoy are under the city line item, right?
Correct. Yeah. So the Park District, they're going to levy for things like the theater, the pool, any type of programs that they have at the community center.
Hmm. And that is a little unusual. I know when we moved to town back in 91 or whatever it was, that even took a while for me to get my kind of head around that. Being from the suburbs, this kind of was a a park district or what have you, was responsible for all the things park. But yes, here the park district is community center pool, just like Jamie said. But City Park, Richmond Hill Park, Lodge Park, the playgrounds, all the equipment and stuff that's at them all really falls under the city's responsibility. And off and on, at least on my years involved, there's been some level of informal discussion about does that make sense maybe to combine that, maybe have one entity take them all over, that sort of thing. But then once you start digging into it, you realize, wow, that's a can of worms that nobody wants to open. So the idea dies off. But yes, there is confusion with that. But but again, the city of Geneseo line item that's the stuff that the city has again responsibility for, and as you're an elected official, and as I also said previously, it's the number one topic of discussion always comes to finances, and we have some of our most lively discussions and stuff on that. And I would say though too, at least Brandon and Jamie, maybe you agree with that, but there's a kind of a nice diverse set of views on council, too. And I think that's important. And, and even as we're approaching the point, too, that if you do have some interest maybe in serving as an elected official, as an alderman, there is an election coming up, and there's a process. It's really pretty simple. You got to fill out a couple forms and get some petitions signed and this and that. But if it's something that you think you have an interest in, contact City Hall, and they can get you pointed in the right direction on all of that. But it's good, having that, a little blend of young and old, and people at different stages with families and some without families, and it's just a good blend to reach decisions. Yeah. And as our guests look, and our listeners will know that we have student announcements and stuff that interrupt it. And even though on air you really can't hear them too much, but it is kind of distracting here in the studio. It always does get a reaction from our guests. But
this is when we get up and dance on the show.
but that's usually our marker for that. And usually the case is I've rambled on too much, but that we need to kind of be wrapping it up. So, Brandon, I'll turn control back to you here to.
Yeah. A couple other things we want to mention before we wrap up today's show. Do want to mention a couple of things going on around town. The 2nd Street water main project, 2nd and Oakwood. We're going to see continued road closures there to replace a very dilapidated water main. That's going to run through the end of next week, it looks like, with intermittent road closures there to get that taken care of. Folks have noticed that there's closures around the Central Bank in downtown. The sidewalk there, they were approved by the Plan Commission and City Council for a project where they're redoing the entire facade of the building. So it's a massive upgrade, a beautiful investment into State Street. It's going to cause for some sidewalk closures and things. The city's working closely with that contractor and the bank to make sure that that's cleaned up for the Christmas walk and some of the big things coming up this winter.
It's going to be a nice one. We've seen the drawings. It's going to be nice when it's finished. That's for sure.
Yeah. Keith and I did want to make sure we mentioned that there will be no show next Friday. That's Veterans Day. We're off on that day, taking the day off.
Although there is school that day, but there is no radio program next Friday. Although if you're not doing anything Saturday, I think Saturday is Isle of Flags.
Yes.
Traditionally, so if weather permits, you want to volunteer. Volunteers are truly appreciated. Be up there early Saturday morning to help with that. Contact Brandon at City Hall for additional information.
Yeah. And then we're going to take this show on the road on the 17th. Is that the plan, Keith?
That is the plan. It'll be our Thanksgiving on the road special. To be determined. We're either going to be at the donut shop or McDonald's.
Is this going to be like how to cook your turkey properly with Alderman Keith Kennett?
Well, and it was noticed that we have our WKRP T-shirt hanging up here.
I was thinking turkeys away.
As God is my witness.
One of I'd say the greatest individual TV episode in all of history.
I would agree, though. The turkey drop, was it Pinehurst Mall or whatever it was. Oh, the humanity. But anyway, we won't be doing that, but we'll be, it'll be a show of thankfulness and that sort of thing. And but yeah, it'll be one of those two locations. Of course, probably one of us should talk to them and see if that's okay. But we're pretty sure we'll have information to share about where we'll be at on the 17th. And I'll say this, that wherever it is, we'll either buy you a cup of coffee or a cup of coffee and a donut. And Keith and Brandon.
We might just show up at your front door. So
that could be fine. We do have some Skittles left and some Rocket LED flashlights that are excess from Halloween.
Yeah. Mark and Jamie, any final thoughts for today?
Oh, no, just appreciate it. Just a lot of fun sitting down here with both of you. Like I said, I always love talking about the markets, what's going on in the economy. So just a great opportunity. Look forward to the next time we all get together again.
Well, and I take that as he's coming back. So that's good.
We didn't scare him off.
All right, and Jamie, I'm not so sure on, though. I think Jamie has enjoyed her morning here with us also.
Of course.
Yes. Okay, well, with that, if there are any questions or comments, topics you'd like us to discuss, best way to contact us is to email Brandon. Brandon, your email is?
Yeah, bmeglin at cityofgeneseo.com, BMAEGLIN at cityofgeneseo.com, or just give us a call.
There you go. Or if you see Brandon and I out and about or what have you, just feel free to share any thoughts and stuff as well. So with that, that's going to wrap up the program for this morning. We appreciate you listening, and this is WGRG 100.5 FM in Geneseo.